That was Lee Jackson, who was talking about the internet and the invention of it. We're now going to move on to our next presenter. Again, no idea what he's going to talk about, but you will find out. Please give it up for Mr. Tom Evans!
Hello. Hi. Yes. Hello, I'm Tom, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about why I think you should say, I don't know. Now, a lot of people think that saying I don't know is a bad thing, and that's understandable, because that's what we're told to think. If you take a test and you say, I don't know, then you get an F. If you ask a surgeon which of your limbs they were about to amputate, and they say, I don't know, then you probably start looking for a new hospital. If you ask a politician something like, should we privatise the NHS? You'd like a clear answer, right? But I think that actually once in a while, I'd quite like a politician to say, I don't know. Because when you know something, you stop questioning it. If you know that privatising the NHS, that's Andrew Lansley, would be a good thing, then why bother to consider the argument that it might actually be a colossal mess up? But on the other hand, of course, if you know that it's a bad thing, why stop to wonder whether it might actually do some good? Now, knowing something is the lazy option. When you say, I don't know, you're recognising the sheer, mind-melting, befuddling complexity of the world that we live in. And the thing is, there are actually lots of different ways of not knowing something too. Now, Donald Rumsfeld, of all people, actually had quite a good go at explaining this. He said, there are known knowns, there are things that we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. It's things that we don't know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. Those are things that we do not know we do not know. So, the Plain English campaign called that speech the worst abuse of English language this year. But Rumsfeld was actually trying to say something really interesting, which is that there are lots of different ways of knowing and not knowing things. So there are some things you know, like what's on this slide. There are some things you know you don't know, like what's going to be on my next slide. But there are lots of things that you don't know that you don't know. So you can plan for things that you know about and calculate probabilities for things that you know you don't know. But how can you even try and prepare for something that you don't know you don't know? So unknown unknowns can often cause something known as an outside context problem. So you've got your game plan, you're going up to bat, and then a giant cat bursts in and eats all of your team. If you were a financial trader in late 2001, you would have had plans and tools and systems to deal with all kinds of stock market things, from wobbles to full-on crashes. But of course, none of those things were really any use when someone flew 2 planes into the World Trade Center. That's a stock market trader, you can't see. So sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't know, and sometimes you don't know you don't know. But sometimes there just isn't a thing to know. So there's a classic thought experiment from philosophy called the Sorites paradox that illustrates this. Imagine you've got a big heap of sand. So everyone knows what a heap is, right? That's a heap of sand. Now if you take away 1 grain of sand, is it still a heap? Do you think that ever taking 1 grain of sand away can turn it from being a heap into not being a heap? Because if you keep taking away grains of sand, one at a time, then at some point you'll be left with 1 grain of sand, which by deduction has never stopped being a heap. So the question is, at what point did that heap stop being a heap? How many grains of sand even make a heap? Is it 200, 2,000? Where do you draw the line? And this applies on a more practical level too. How many deaths make a war just or unjust? At what point during pregnancy does a lump of cells become a person? So the answer to questions like this is mu. Mu is a concept from Zen Buddhism that means unask your question, because the question does not make sense. Mu says there is no line to be drawn. It's easy to think that all questions have yes or no answers, but that's not really the way the world works. The language that we use to communicate with each other and describe the world around us and talk about ideas seems precise, but it's actually incredibly vague. It's not normally a problem, but when you start asking questions like, is privatising the NHS a good idea, or should we start a war with Iran, it's easy to lose sight of all those shades of grey. But just because someone has asked a question doesn't always mean that the question has an answer. So when you think about it, saying I don't know isn't an expression of ignorance. It's really the only sensible answer to an illogical world. So I hope to think about saying more often. Thank you.
Tom Evans, thank you very much for that philosophical discourse, Tom. I love philosophy.